Oh hey, welcome back. Extended range offset guitars have really been growing in popularity over the last 10 years. Starting out with bands like Loathe, who famously played the Squier Jazzmaster Baritone, to the Beatles Get Back documentary series, which led to an enormous surge in sales of both Fender and Squier Basics instruments. Not to mention Mike Adams' insanely cool Creston custom offset baritone as well. It's safe to say that the Jazzmaster Baritone and Basics concept is now more popular than ever before. As a result, there's been a whole host of affordable Jazzmaster Baritone and Bass6 instruments hitting the market, but they've all had one fatal flaw. This Jet Guitars offset baritone promises to fix all of that, and it's potentially the perfect offset baritone for just 300 quid. Could this be the guitar that changes my mind on baritones? Let's jump into it to find out. To explain why I was so excited when I saw this guitar and what makes it so special, we first have to put it in the context of the existing offset baritone market, and there have been some really cool guitars released over the last few years. Of course, there's been the Squier vintage modified Jazzmaster Baritone and Bass6 models, as well as the classic Vibe Bass6 which succeeded it. There's been the Guitar Bass VS and JA Baritone models from Harley Benton, the 638 HH offset baritone by Gear for Music's in-house brand under the various iterations of the brand name that they've had now, the Revelation RJT60B with its 3 P90 size Jazzmaster pickups and its offset vibrato, the Firefly FFJA6 which is suspiciously similar to the Gear for Music model, and the Artist Grungemaster baritone and 6-string bass guitar models as well. And then on the more expensive end of the market, there's been some offset baritones which have deviated from Fender's classic shapes. For example, Eastwood have released the Sidejack and Surfcaster baritones, as well as a couple of signature models. Reverend have released the Descent baritone, and Revolta Guitars have released the Mondata. And then there's one guitar that is affordable but also non-traditional, which is the Aria Pro 2 Jet B-Tone. However, all of the traditional Fender-style offset baritones have had a 30-inch scale length. That's proper bass guitar scale length. And while that makes sense for a Bass6 guitar, many of these have been marketed specifically as baritones and not as Bass6s. Now, I'm on the small end of medium size, and my instruments of choice are Mustangs and Jaguars. The short scale just feels perfect to me. And so the jump from the 24-inch scale of the Mustang to the 30-inch scale of a Bass6 or other offset baritone feels absolutely ginormous to me. I've always really liked the idea of an offset baritone, but that enormous scale length has always been such a barrier to entry for me. The frustrating thing is it doesn't have to be this way. Only the questionably named Fender Jaguar Bottom Master, an exclusive for the Japanese market, has had a shorter scale length at either 28.5 or 27.5 inches, depending on who you're asking. Why isn't anyone making a Jaguar baritone? When you bear in mind that baritone scale is 26.5 inches up to 30.5 inches, what gives? Why is every single affordable Fender-style offset baritone so long? Won't anyone please think of the Mustang and Jaguar players?
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Not only that, but most of these models come with a 12, 14 or even 16-inch fretboard radius, and that's commonly paired with a really wide nut and really tall jumbo frets. While they might look like jangly 1960s Fender offset guitars, they are very much intended for the modern metal player. The feel and playing experience is very much removed from the guitars that their aesthetic is inspired by. So for the average offset guitar player who's looking to get a baritone for songwriting and recording, which will look familiar and fit the vibe of their other instruments, but without breaking the bank, there really hasn't been a viable option as far as I'm concerned. Well, all of that is set to change with the Jet Guitars JJ350 Baritone. A silver burst, short scale offset baritone sounds like it was practically custom made for me. Jet Guitar's European distributor kindly sent this to me to review, so big thanks to the team at Avallon Europe. Just like my review of the vintage Revo Colt, this is going to be a really honest and transparent review about everything I love about this instrument and anything that I think could be better as well. And considering that this is a channel dedicated to offset guitars, we're not just going to be reviewing this as an ordinary instrument, we're going to be reviewing how this stacks up specifically as an offset guitar. Alright, so buckle up because things are about to get nerdy. Let's start with the specs, and many of the things here, despite this being a baritone, will be very familiar to Fender offset guitar players. For starters, this guitar has a roasted poplar body. Now, poplar is the same wood that was used on the Fender Mustang back in the 60s. However, being roasted, that means it's had all of the moisture taken out, making it much lighter, much more stable, and much harder as well. This is a big improvement over normal poplar, which is a relatively soft hardwood. I can confirm that these screws bite really nicely in the wood, they're held really firmly in place, and this guitar is super lightweight. This has been paired with a Canadian rock maple neck, which again has been roasted to make it significantly more stable and light. It's carved into a nice familiar C shape, which is 21.5mm thick at the 1st fret and goes up to 23.1mm at the 12th fret. That's topped with a proper rosewood fretboard, which is a really nice dark colour, and the fret inlays on the side straddle the fretboard and the shaftwood in the proper 1960s Fender style. It has a vintage spec 1.65 inch nut width, a 9.5 inch radius fretboard, and 22 stainless steel frets. I am ecstatic to report that these frets are a sensible size. They are 2.2mm wide by 1mm tall, which puts them at the very bottom of medium size. Again, this is perfect for me, and it's like this guitar was custom made with me in mind. My fretting hand is so heavy that whenever I play jumbo or even medium jumbo frets, I just cannot keep the guitar in tune. For me, the smaller the frets are, the better. The scale length is a really lovely 27 inches, and that means that the difference in scale length between this and a Jazzmaster is the same difference as between a Jazzmaster and a Jaguar. So it feels very natural to pick this up and it's very easy to adjust to. The pickups have been custom spec'd by Jet, and we have a moderate output ceramic humbucker in the bridge and a P90 in the neck position. And it is a string through body with a Tunematic bridge. A quick look under the pickguard reveals two 500k pots and ample room to experiment with different pickups in this guitar as well. Now, it's not routed for a rhythm circuit, of course, but it does look like there is ample room here for a strategically placed Jaguar-style switch bank for the pickup selection. Overall, it's just really nice that this guitar is spec'd out like a traditional Fender guitar, rather than having a more modern metal-focused spec. Alright then, so what were my first impressions of the Jet JJ350 Baritone? I have to say, I could not believe the quality of this guitar when I first took it out of the box. The QC and fit and finish on this guitar are simply off the charts, and straight away it feels like a much more expensive instrument than its £300 price tag. It really is like the Jaguar Baritone I've been desperate for someone to make, with its shorter scale length and 22 frets. A fun bit of trivia, if you don't know this already, is that the Fender Jaguar was the first guitar that Fender put 22 frets on. And so having this body shape with the 22 frets and that shorter scale length really does very much make this feel like a Jaguar Baritone, despite its less traditional pickups and electronics. Straight out the gate, this was showing potential for being the baritone that I've always been looking for. Like many offset-inspired guitars, the JJ350 has both a thinner and a smaller body than a traditional Fender offset guitar. This helps make a very long guitar more compact in size, as well as making it ultra lightweight. But you can definitely tell the difference when you see the two guitars side by side. In fact, funnily enough, this 27-inch scale baritone guitar is the same length as a 24-inch short scale Jaguar. So there is a big difference there in terms of the size of the body. Coming from playing vintage style Fender Jaguars with a skinnier neck and a thicker and larger body, this does feel a little bit strange at first because it's the opposite. It has a slightly fatter neck with a smaller, thinner body. But once you adjust, it is a very comfortable package. It balances just about okay on a strap. Using a very slippery seatbelt style strap, how well it balances depends on how grippy your clothing is. With a more grippy outer garment, it will stay in place okay if you're stationary, but once you start to move around, it will slowly fall down. Whereas if you have a more slippy outer garment to begin with, then you will definitely notice some considerable neck dive with this guitar. That's because the weight distribution is very different to a normal Jaguar. On a normal Jaguar, all of the weight is concentrated down here towards the output jack. Whereas on this guitar, with its smaller, thinner body and longer neck, the weight is definitely over in the headstock. It still feels okay though, and with a more grippy strap on a more grippy outer garment, I think you'll be absolutely fine. I did initially have some concerns when I saw that this guitar came with a Tunematic bridge but a 9.5-inch radius fretboard. However, on this instrument, I haven't been able to perceive any mismatch in the string radius between the bridge and the fretboard, and I think it works totally fine in this context. I was also totally floored by the setup that this guitar comes with as well. From the nut slots to the truss rod to the action and intonation, everything, more or less, was completely perfectly dialed in from the moment I took it out of the box. So I have to say, my initial impressions were overwhelmingly positive. The care and attention to detail that's gone into the construction of this guitar and the materials it's made out of are all really high quality and just next level. It feels, looks, and sounds way more expensive than its £300 price tag, so I was totally blown away by that. However, I'm not a baritone player. And while I can give my impressions and my review of this guitar as a normal electric guitar player picking up a baritone for the first time, I thought it might be useful to get the opinion of a seasoned baritone and basics player as well. So I've invited my brother-in-law Joe to come round and have a little jangle on this thing and let you know what he makes of it. His primary instruments are bass six and baritone, and unlike me, whereas I'm just a guitar player, he is a proper musician. And he has used bass sixes and baritones on the road in bands and in his solo project as well. So he is very well placed to give you an opinion and a review on how this guitar stacks up as a baritone. How do you like it? How does it compare to like your bass six or your Gretsch or like Squier stuff?
I think for me, like it does feel a little bit more compact than maybe what I'm used to, because like my Gretsch, that's 29 and a quarter or 3/4, I can't remember off the top of my head. So that's obviously quite down here. Bass six as well. I think the main difference between this and that is, I mean, the string gauge on this is obviously quite different. I run bass six strings on that. I think the neck definitely feels different. I prefer a much more natural neck, similar to that on my Gretsch and my Telecaster.
The bass six has got like the thick kind of plasticky.
It's very glossy, which I don't always like. And if you're playing like a hot and sweaty gig, you can get stuck on it a little bit easier than a bit more of a natural worn finish. Another thing that I do quite like the side to side switch as opposed to up and down, particularly with like my Telecaster being a 4-way switch, left to right. I much prefer that, and that's the main guitar where I do any sort of like signal switching. The Gretsch tends to always be in the bridge position. I don't really use the neck position as much on the Gretsch. But when I do switch, it feels a bit more natural to me to switch left to right. But
did you like how it sounds?
I do. For me, I'm used to much thicker strings, which obviously bring a bit of a different tone with the guitar, but I do really like how it sounds actually. I do like P90s a lot, and particularly for the more mellow ambient stuff, I think the P90 sound fits very nicely. But obviously having the humbucker in the bridge when you can sort of dig in a little bit more is always good fun. But I definitely noticed that this has a bit more, it leans a bit more this way, so there's a bit more neck dive in comparison to other baritones that I have played. The position of these knobs throws me off a little bit. Like you said, when I went to turn down the volume, I turned down the tone just because I'd almost expected the tone to be further away. But I guess you'd get used to the position of the volume the more you play this.
If you had 300 quid and we're looking for a baritone, Would you buy one of these, or would your money be somewhere else?
No, to be fair, for the price, that's pretty decent. Yeah, I probably would strongly consider this at that price point. I think when you're looking at the sort of Squiers and stuff like that, like they have their space. But I think with people like Fender and Squier discontinuing like the more Jazzmaster sort of shaped baritones, which have humbuckers or like just 2 pickups as opposed to a bass 6, this is definitely a good one to place in that kind of like price point in that market.
Alright, so given that this is the first time I've spent any real time with a baritone before, and given how much promise it has to be the offset baritone Jaguar that I've always been looking for, what were the things that I really liked about this guitar? Well, first of all, I love how lightweight this guitar is. It comes in at just over £7, and it is really a joy to wear this on a strap. It is super, super lightweight. Secondly, I could not believe the standard that the fretwork is done to on this guitar. There's no sharp fret ends. Every single fret is unbelievably smooth. The fretwork is just super neat. The work is so uniform. There's no fret buzz anywhere on the neck. There's no choking out, no high points. The quality of the fretwork on this guitar at this price point is just mind-bending. I can't believe how good the fretwork is. I said that on the vintage Revo Colt as well, and there's a similar level of quality to the fret job, but these frets are so smooth. There is not a hint of scratchiness to them whatsoever. If you handed me this neck detached from the rest of the guitar and told me that this was from a guitar costing 2 or even 3 times as much, I'd probably be inclined to believe you. The fretwork on this instrument really is that good. Thirdly, as I mentioned earlier, I was so impressed by the setup that this came with out of the box. The only thing I did to this guitar was to raise the bridge pickup. But the action, the intonation, the neck relief was all spot on, and the nut is cut to the perfect width and the perfect depth for each string on this guitar as well. I can't believe how good the nut is on this, and it blows something like a Squier Classic vibe out of the water, as does the overall setup and the fretwork. Everything on this is just next level. In a similar vein, the finish work on this guitar is all top notch as well. There is one tiny speck under the clear coat on the back here on the silver part of the burst, but apart from that, the finish work is just so neat and uniform. The satin finish on the back of the roasted neck feels sublime to play, and overall there is not a single flaw apart from this tiny little one here that I can find. The burst also has a really interesting point here where the 2 colors merge, where it has a kind of blue color to the silver burst, which is really unique and interesting as well. Unlike the many Squier Classic vibes that I've played, there isn't a single screw on the pickguard here that has gone into the body wonky, where the hole on the pickguard and the body underneath don't quite align. Each screw has gone in perfectly straight, and again, there's just shows a real level of attention to detail and quality control that's gone into this instrument that you don't see on those other big brands. The next thing I've loved about this guitar is how clear and bright and punchy the neck pickup is. Although this is different obviously to the kind of pickup that you would get on a Jazzmaster or a Jaguar, neither of which use P90s, I've really enjoyed this particular voicing of this pickup. It really does have a ton of clarity, and it's way brighter than I would expect as well. And although it has a different voice than a traditional offset pickup, it really is in keeping with one in terms of its brightness, its tightness, and its punchiness. And that tight low end really goes a long way to working on an extended scale guitar like this, where there is so much more lows than you would get on a normal guitar. And while I did have my gripes with the bridge pickup, which we'll come on to in a second, I have to say, matched with a high output amp or a fuzz pedal, this bridge pickup really does rip. I just really love the fact that this guitar isn't just trying to be another bass 6 or a modern metal machine. This is giving a completely different flavour of offset baritone that feels so familiar and so comfortable to a Jazzmaster and Jaguar player, and is just something completely different in a market which is full of bass 6 copies that are designed to be used for heavy metal playing, as exemplified by the band Loathe. While of course it does have some modern specs like the stainless steel frets, the roasted body and neck, the HS pickup configuration and the Tunematic bridge, because it still has that skinny vintage nut width, the round and 9.5-inch fretboard radius, the smaller medium frets, and a pretty traditional C-shaped neck profile, it really does feel at home as a lover and a massive fan of vintage Fender offset guitars. I feel like the shorter 27-inch scale length really does set it apart and just make it so comfortable for a Jaguar player like myself. It really has removed every barrier, and I have loved playing this thing. As a newcomer to the world of baritones, it is so much more comfortable than that monster scale length, and I could really imagine myself playing this a lot. So lots of positive things to say there, but were there any things that I didn't enjoy quite so much? Any negatives or perhaps any room for improvement? Well, there are 3 things that I do want to mention, but these are largely preference based, and the QC, overall construction and attention to detail is really excellent, but there are 3 things I would like to be a little bit different personally. Now, the first thing that I have to say is because this package felt so familiar, I constantly found myself subconsciously reaching for the vibrato arm, only to be greeted with thin air. And I had to settle with either using the volume knob to give me a subtle tremolo effect, or maybe not so subtle, and kind of shaking the neck to try to recreate some of that vibrato effects that I'm so used to on an offset guitar. So if I own one of these, I would totally put a short vibrola on here. You may never have seen a vibrola on an offset guitar before, but the reason I would use that particular vibrato is there's enough space for one back here because we don't have that much space to work with, and also you don't need to root out a cavity for a vibrola. You just need to drill 3 screw holes into the body. And on top of that, the lip of the vibrola would cover the bridge ferrules here, so you wouldn't be able to tell necessarily they had been converted from a string through to a vibrato guitar, unless of course you looked on the back. This means it would look very natural on this guitar, and I would then of course swap the bridge out for something a little bit more vibrato friendly. I really do wish this guitar had a vibrato on it just because it feels so much like an offset guitar, but not having a vibrato is really kind of create some sort of cognitive dissonance there, and I think it would really improve this guitar that little bit more. So I would totally put a vibrola on here. And secondly, that extra weight of the vibrola down here would probably help balance out the guitar a little bit better as well. I really do wish the body was just a little bit bigger or a little bit thicker to help this guitar balance a bit better on the strap or even in your lap as well. On a traditional offset guitar, the placement of the strap button is around the 13th fret, and this makes the guitar hang in a really nice comfortable way, and all of the weight from that large body is focused down towards the output jack. Whereas on this guitar, the strap button meets the body in the 15th or 16th fret location. So that counterbalance point is already moved further back, and combined with the lighter, thinner body, especially given this is a beautifully lightweight roasted body with this longer, fatter neck, that really does give it a tendency to be neck heavy. Now, like I said, possibly with the added metal weight of a vibrola here, or with a grippier strap than this horrible seatbelt strap I've got, or perhaps the classic trick of putting some fishing weights on the back of the guitar or in the pickguard cavity. It's not a deal breaker, but it is something that I wish was a little bit more comfortable. And the only other negative thing I can possibly say about this guitar is that I really do wish that the bridge pickup was both brighter and louder. I have seen a demo of this guitar for someone doing heavy, djenty, chuggy metal playing, and I think in that context a really mid-range focused humbucker does work really well. But given that we have this really bright, clear, jangly neck pickup with loads of treble and clarity, it just really isn't a good match to have this bridge pickup that is so much duller and mid-focused. In my experience, if you EQ the amp to sound really good with the neck pickup, then the bridge pickup will sound way too dull and lifeless and quiet. Whereas if you EQ the amp to sound really good with the bridge pickup, the neck pickup will then sound super brash and really kind of grating in the high end in your ear holes. I really couldn't find a way, even after adjusting the pickup height on the bridge, to get the two to work nicely together. It kind of seems like they're intended for completely different applications, and the idea is that you're never supposed to switch between them. So personally, if this guitar was mine, I would want to swap this bridge pickup out for something perhaps a little bit louder and for something a lot clearer and brighter as well. I think that would match much better with the neck pickup, and it would suit the voice of the guitar a lot better given its offset shape. However, if you're not used to the bright, punchy clarity of a Jazzmaster or Jaguar to begin with, then this pickup might not even sound dark to you to begin with at all, and you might be perfectly happy with it. So given that those are the only 3 negative things I could possibly find to say about this guitar, and that 2 of those are entirely subjective and preference based, that gives you an impression of how good this is as an objective instrument. But the questions still remain. How was my first baritone experience? Do I recommend this guitar? And is it the instrument that I've always been looking for? Well, yeah, I really like this guitar. As I've said, it has completely taken away many of the barriers to entry for baritones for me that I've experienced in the past, and many of the things that made baritones feel like completely different instruments altogether. This guitar feels comfortable and familiar to me as a Jaguar and Jazzmaster player, but it also has a completely different range of sounds given the extended range of the instrument and the different electronics and pickups, and it is completely horizon expanding. This guitar kind of allowed me to forget that I was playing a baritone and just let me enjoy the extended range and unusual sounds. I feel like you can't really ask for more than that, and just allowed me to try new things without having to think or adjust to the feel of the instrument. So that is a massive win for me, and I really enjoyed playing this. I can't express how different an experience it is playing this to playing a bass 6 for me, or any other baritone. There is something about this that just clicks for me as a short scale offset guitar player that just really works in a way that other baritones haven't for me. I would love to have this for recording or songwriting. I can imagine putting this to such great use in that kind of context. Or for like a 2-piece band that uses a really heavy extended range guitar and just drums, I think that would be perfect for this as well. So yeah, this really has lived up to all of the expectations that I had for it as potentially being the perfect offset baritone for me. Just smack a vibrola on there and I think I'll be in heaven. Okay, now I think this has absolutely turned out to be the baritone for me, but would it be the baritone for you? Well, first of all, with the Jazzmaster Jaguar focus of this channel in mind, I think this guitar will be an excellent choice for an offset guitar player who is really interested in the idea or the concept of the Fender Japan Bottom Master Jaguar, but who just can't afford to pay the crazy prices for that kind of Japanese exclusive limited edition guitar. This short scale baritone is a dream if you love Fender Jaguars and want to experiment with a baritone for no more than the cost of a Squier Classic Vibe. And just in general, I think this guitar is an excellent shout for someone who has perhaps been intrigued by baritones in the past, but who has found the jump to those really long scale lengths or really kind of modern metal kind of style of kind of neck and fretboard and nut width to be too much of a jump from the guitars they're used to. I think this will be an excellent choice for someone in that kind of position because it doesn't feel too foreign. It's a relatively small jump in terms of scale length, particularly if you're a Jazzmaster, Strat or Tele player, but it really does open all of those possibilities that come with an extended range instrument. So I think this guitar is both for people with smaller hands who are interested in trying a baritone, as well as those for whom the specs of many baritones or bass 6 instruments are just too alien compared with what they're used to. I would say that if what you're really looking for is a bass 6 that can sometimes double up as a baritone, then this probably isn't going to be the right instrument for you because the 27-inch scale length just isn't long enough to drop the whole instrument by an octave. And although with a creative approach you can play iconic riffs from a 6-string guitar an octave lower than usual on this instrument, this isn't going to be where this particular guitar shines. If that's what you're looking for, I would recommend sticking with the Squier Bass 6 or perhaps the Harley Benton offset baritone or Bass 6 models. Okay, and so what's the bottom line if you are a seasoned and experienced baritone and Bass 6 player? Joe? If you had to give like a one-line summary of like, do you recommend it? What kind of player do you think it's for?
I would recommend it. I don't think if you were playing heavier stuff, I probably wouldn't pick this necessarily. Just for me, it feels like a much more slower moving guitar. So for me, playing more ambient stuff, for me in terms of the sound and sort of like being able to go around it, it feels like I want to spend a bit more time with it, a song or something like that, rather than sort of going high and fast.
You were saying it feels a bit more like a traditional Fender kind of neck?
Yeah, I think, for me, playing baritones and bass 6 is like, my shortest baritone is 20-inch scale length. This is like already an inch shorter than the smallest that I'm used to when it comes to baritones. So going from, my longest being 30-inch to 27, it does feel like a bit of a difference and almost like similar to what I'd expect. Like it feels very similar to the neck of like an acoustic, let's say, in terms of like where that would sit. Yeah, it feels shorter and feels a little bit more different to play than the baritones I'm used to.
All right, well, I hope you've really enjoyed coming along with me for the ride as I try out a baritone guitar for the first time. And I hope that I've been able to articulate how much I enjoy this guitar and how much I've really got on with it and how it's broken down all of those barriers to entry for me that have normally stopped me from bonding with an offset baritone or any other type of baritone for that matter. Thanks again to Avallon and Europe for sending this across. And if you do have any questions about this that I didn't cover, or if anything was unclear, please do feel free to drop those in the comment section below and I will get back to you in as much detail as you would like. I've already exceeded my goals for the channel this year, so now I'm really striving for an exceptionally high goal. I'm trying to reach 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so we've got about 400 more to go and just about 4 months. So if you enjoyed this content, if you've watched this far, please do give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to help me reach that goal by the end of the year. Alright then, well, thank you for watching. Until next time, take it easy, look after yourselves, and we'll see each other again soon.